Right, wait for that to happen. Thank you very much. Okay, welcome everybody to the Planning Development Management Committee on Thursday, the 5th of November 2020. Please note the meeting will be recorded and published online for the public access after the meeting. And all attendees switch off their camera and mute their microphone when not speaking. The camera and microphone should only be switched on when you're invited to speak. Guidance on how to do this contained in the guidance issued to you. And I remind everybody that there's an item of quasi-judicial business for the committee's consideration, and members are reminded that if they leave the room or the meeting during consideration of any application or the application, you will be unable to participate or vote on the item when you return. Please advise the clerk via the meeting chat that you're leaving the room and therefore unable to attend the item. What I would also say is, I know that we can sometimes have issues with connections. So if that happens, what we'll do is obviously pause the meeting to allow people to re-establish connections. So I just wanted to make sure everyone's aware of that. I will now ask the clerk to advise members participating today for all members to confirm their attendance once their name has been announced by the clerk, so that there's a clear recording of the meeting, and it can also be recorded by the clerk. I hand over to Ms. McBain.
Thank you, convener. So if members can just indicate that they're present, please. So convener.
Here.
Vice convener, Councillor Stewart.
I'm here.
Councillor Allen.
Here.
Councillor Hendrickson.
Present.
Councillor Copeland.
I'm here.
Councillor Cormie.
Here.
Councillor Delaney.
Here.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Here.
And Councillor Malik.
Here.
Okay, all 9 members are present. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. McBain. We'll move on to the agenda proper. So can I just check that at 1.1, everybody has the motion against officer's recommendation procedural note?
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to 2.1, which is determination of urgent business. There is none. 3.1, is there any declarations of interest? Nope. Okay, super. Right, we've got the minutes of the previous meeting. They're on pages 9 to 18. Has anybody got anything you want to raise? Otherwise, can we agree that's an accurate minute? Okay, I'll take your silences.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. The committee planner at 5.1 on pages 19 to 20. Again, there for your information. So we'll now move on to the general business, where there's a recommendation is one of approval at 6.1, which is planning permission in principle for residential mixed-use development of up to residential units and breaching of up to 2,000 square meters with associated infrastructure, access, landscaping, drainage studs, and open space at the land of North Eastside Road, Miltimber, Aberdeen. It's on your pages 21 to 84, planning reference 200535. I can now hand over to the planning officer, Mr. Gavin Clark, who will take us through the application. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. I'll just get the PowerPoint up. Here we go. So here we are. Site, which extends to 11.5 hectares, is located on the southern side of North Eastside Road in Miltimber. The site is bound by North Eastside Road and residential properties to the north, the Deeside Way and open space to the south, and further residential properties to the east and west. An access road leading to Deeside livery stables runs through the centre of the site. The site is largely grassed and slopes from north to south towards the Dee Valley. The site is zoned in the extant 2017 Aberdeen Local Development Plan as OP114, Miltimber South, for a mixed-use opportunity for 60 houses and 1,225 square metres of ancillary office retail space with the requirement. The following slides give an overview of the site in its current form. So the first site plan shows utilities that exist on the site and the surrounding area. The red is the combined sewer, the blue is the water main, and the green is the light green is the existing aqueduct.
Gavin, we've still just got the construction red. Haven't got another slide. There meant to be a different slide up.
There should be site plan showing utilities.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the red, the blue.
No, that's not on our page, is what I'm saying. We've only got item 6.1, construction of residential lead mix.
Okay, it should be.
Slide's not moved on, I think, perhaps.
Okay. I'm not quite sure what's happened there because it's showing on my screen.
Well, it's certainly not showing on mine. Can anybody else see it?
It's not on mine either, Mary.
Okay,
The slide's not there, but it is on the actual papers.
yeah, we've got papers, but your slides are not moving, Gavin. I'm not quite sure what's happening.
Okay, I'll try ending it and starting it
That's
again.
it. So,
Okay, that work. I'll just go through this way then. So I'll go back and just sort of go through again. So you can see the location plan there.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and then this was just the site overview, looking at it from the south. So that just showed what's in the surrounding area. And then this was the plan I was just talking about with the utilities, the red being the existing combined sewer, the blue being the water main, and the green being the aqueduct that runs through the site. Then I just have some site photographs of the site. So the first one on top here is a view looking west from the eastern boundary of the site. And a next one's from the southeast corner of the site, just looking north. Then we have another one just from the first one here is from the north of the site. And then the other two are from the sort of the access road in the site looking east and west. And they show the sort of gradient that runs from north to south on this site. The next drawings show the western boundary and the southern boundary from the Deeside Way, so there's a fair amount of vegetation there. And then we have the eastern boundary, just shown on these three photographs here. And I'll leave this document up here as I go through the rest of my presentation. This just shows the indicative master plan layout that's been submitted with the associated master plan. Planning permission in principle is sought for a mixed-use residential and commercial development. The application description refers to this comprising up to 99 residential units and retail development of up to 2,000 square metres. Since the application was submitted, the development has been assessed and refined through the master planning and application process and is now considered as an in-principle development proposal of up to 80 residential units and up to 1,225 square metres of ancillary commercial, office and retail space. This amended proposal and supporting documents was subject to neighbour re-notification in September 2020. The indicative master plan shows a landscape buffer along the northern section of the site with two accesses onto North Deeside Road. The residential element would run through most of the site, with the commercial element proposed in the northeast corner of the site. A suds basin is proposed in the southeast corner of the site. It should be noted that as the proposal is for planning permission in principle, full details will be proposed through a future application for either detailed planning permission or approval of matters specified in conditions. The purpose of this planning permission in principle application and associated master plan is to set the parameters for an appropriate mix, layout and scale of development when assessed against the site's allocation and relevant policies of the ALDP. So I'll just go through another couple of slides here. This is an indicative layout with connections. So the blue on here is the proposed road accesses to the site. The pink dots are footpath connections with associated red dots showing footpath connections through the site. And the yellow point there is a proposed pedestrian crossing to the north side of North Deeside Road. And then this last drawing, this other additional drawing here just shows the proposed landscape framework as shown in the master plan. The application has been referred to Planning Committee due to the proposal being a major development because it has received more than 6 letters of objection, and an objection has been received from Cults, Beeldside and Miltimber Community Council. A proposal application notice was submitted in October 2019 with public events held in November and December 2019. In addition, the proposal was presented to the pre-application forum on the 5th of December 2019. Details of these events are provided on page 40 of the agenda papers. Consultee responses are provided on pages 41 to 45 of the agenda papers, with consultees generally content with the proposal or having requested the insertion of a number of planning conditions. The Community Council's objection is summarised on pages 43 to 45 of the papers. 782 letters of representation were initially received. This includes 777 letters of objection and 5 letters in support. A second round of public consultation was carried out in September and October, and a further 38 representations were received, a number of which were from original objectors. The matters raised have been summarised and responded to on pages 60 to 72 of the agenda papers. An evaluation of the proposal is provided on pages 47 to 42 of the agenda papers. This looks at matters including the principal development, the strategic development plan, master plan, landscape and visual impact, the mixed use element, transportation, waste management, drainage and flooding, natural heritage, trees and woodlands, open space, noise and air quality, affordable housing, education, developer obligations, sustainability, the historic environment, impact on the airport, digital infrastructure, the proposed ALDP, matters raised by the Community Council and matters raised in representation. As advised previously, it is noted that the site's allocation is for 60 units and 1,225 square metres of retail office space. In this instance, the proposed description refers to up to 99 and 2,000 square metres of retail space. Following due consideration and assessment of the application, it is the view of the planning service that the site could accommodate up to 80 dwellings. This was through further information being submitted in support of the application, which showed there would be no adverse landscape impact, the density would be generally compatible with the surrounding area, roads and drainage issues have been satisfactorily addressed, there would be no adverse impact on residential amenity of neighbouring properties, and developer obligations have been agreed to mitigate the impact on education and community facilities. No supporting information was submitted to justify more than 1,225 square metres of commercial space as per the LDP allocation. With that in mind, through the use of conditions on this application, it is proposed to restrict the level of development to no more than 80 residential units and commercial development of no more than 1,225 square metres. Through this approach, it is considered that there would be no significant conflict with the allocation of the site, nor would the proposal conflict with policies LR1 or H2 of the ALDP. It is, however, noted that members at the full council meeting on the 2nd of March agreed to remove the site from the proposed local development plan and revert its designation back to green belt and green and blue infrastructure, which was previously known as green space network. As a result, the principle of development would not be supported in the proposed plan. The materiality and weight afforded to the proposed LDP is an important factor in the consideration of the current application. The proposed plan, although described as the settled view of the Council following its agreement in March, remains a draft document that cannot be used as the sole basis for determining a planning application. At present, the OP114 is an allocation in the extant LDP that has been enforced since its adoption in January 2017. The extant LDP takes primacy in considering planning applications unless material planning considerations indicate otherwise. There is a possibility that the proposed plan might be altered once it goes through examination in 2021, prior to its expected adoption in spring 2022. And at that time of writing the report, it is not certain that the site will be removed. Considering that the extant 2017 plan takes primacy, the Planning Authority must consider the determination of the planning application within the context of a plan-led process to provide certainty. Given the uncertainty of the proposed LDP, it is considered that less weight must be afforded to it as a material plan consideration and that it would not be sufficient to override the adopted LDP, where the application site is allocated as a mixed-use development as previously described. The application is therefore recommended for a willingness to approve, subject to a number of conditions and a legal agreement for the reasons detailed on pages 72 to 73 of the agenda papers. The proposed conditions are detailed on pages 73 to 79. I'm just going to run through a few more slides just showing the site and the context of the surrounding area. So that the first one here you'll see is the cross section of the site, and the one I would just bring reference to is section DD, and the hatched area that you may see here, that would be the proposed location of the retail unit, and it's just been sort of leveled out there. Then from the master plan as well, these are just a couple of the indicative images that the applicants have submitted in support to show potentially what the residential element could look like. Then the next plan shows an indicative layout for the commercial element of the proposal. The building here just hatched in black with parking and sort of turning for delivery vehicles. And I'm just going to go through 3 further visualizations of the site that were submitted with the master plan. So the first one is from the northeast corner of the site, looking down. Second one is from the northwest corner of the site, looking down from North Deeside Road, and the final one would be from one of the proposed accesses looking south onto North Deeside Road. So that's my presentation, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Evans. Can you hear me okay? I'm getting back. That's it. Questions for officers? I have some, if nobody's got any at the moment. Okay, I'll kick off then. It's for roads, first of all. If, I don't know if it's going to be, I think it might be Mr. Cowie, but I'm sure Mr. Lynch will join in if required. In terms of the road layout, it makes reference to Ghost Lane with a right-hand turn at 2 different locations along the North Deeside Road. Can you give us a little bit more information about what that actually is, please?
So the terms of that is that there'd be a ghost filter lane, that the roads would be required to be adequately wide enough to accommodate a stacking lane to go into either accesses. The necessary requirement for this is to allow that they're still passing vehicles to still head eastbound in towards the city centre and not cause any delays.
I mean, currently on the North Deeside Road, we have a couple of bus islands, I think you call them, or wherever they're in the middle of the road. Now, I know certainly, obviously, we don't want people overtaking the buses, and that's their purpose. But at the moment, if this was a ghost one, which I assume means there's no sort of infrastructure attached to it, it's simply marked, and the road is my understanding. Please correct me if I'm wrong. That currently there wouldn't be enough space to accommodate additional lanes, almost like a third lane at certain points. How is this going to be accommodated?
Well, that's the thing. So at this stage, there's only a planning in principle, so we will have to see a full detailed design, and that will include the width of the road, so we see what can be accommodated. There might need to be a requirement for road widening, but as I say, a detailed design of this will be coming at a later stage. Okay, so road widening, given the infrastructure that's under the development site, it's very unlikely that you'd be able to do much there because of the viaducts and various other things. So what we're looking at then is narrowing pedestrian access along North Deeside Road, one side or the other, or potentially removing cycle lanes. Would that be a fair suggestion? It's too early to determine that, but as I say, we'd have to see what the whole scale of it is with their proposal. The lane widths are probably on the larger side at the moment, but they could be narrowed, but we'll have to see the full extent of that. I mean, currently, I think if you speak to Sustrans and cycling people, that actually the cycle lanes that we currently have are actually not meeting the standard that's required. So any attempt to then further reduce, I think, the cycle lane flies in the face of their claims that they're, providing active travel. But I'll leave that point at the moment. Can I just understand what will be the impact on the existing access for the riding school in terms of on the North Deeside Road? Gavin, would you be able to highlight just exactly where that access is on the plan? Well, there's no, sorry. Okay. From there shouldn't be any impact to that. There would always be required an access to that level of the site as well. Okay, so there'd be a shared access for the residential, yes, and for the horse boxes and everything else. Yeah. Down to the, yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Lawton, I'll just jump in. I didn't realise I was on mute there. There's obviously one of the accesses that runs through the site and down to the stables. So I would imagine that would be used by the stables to access. Well, that would be used by the stables to access their property.
That's required to be retained throughout.
Okay, so there'll be 3 accesses then really into that site, are you saying? Because otherwise it's a shared access with the stables. So do we know?
No, there will only be the 2 accesses, and as I say, the one on the left side here on the indicative master plan from what they're showing would serve the residential properties and the stables to the south.
So we're bringing the horse box through there. Okay.
Just to add on to that, the proposal is also that the second access towards the retail aspect, that would not be proposed to link through into the residential area and would be stopped up for just emergency vehicles only.
Yeah, I read that element.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, can I just ask about the pedestrian crossing? Is that light activated?
Yes, for that level of road, we'd be looking for a signalised crossing.
Okay, because obviously we've already got 3 sets of traffic lights
Yeah.
in a very short space, and given it is leading up to the junction at the AWPR. Okay, can everybody hear me? Because I'm getting a bit of a...
There's a bit of an echo.
Yeah, okay. Can I ask another question then? In terms of the sewer or the water drainage at bottom, I would like to see which page it is, but unfortunately didn't seem to have a page number on mine. It's under drainage and flooding. In terms of the surface drainage water, surface water runoff will be dealt with via new gravity surface water, sewer and road drains, with each plot connected to these sewers via disconnection chamber. Who's going to be responsible for these?
Scott, do you have an input on that?
Which Scott are you?
Sorry, I was
Oh,
speaking.
sorry, Scotland, yeah.
Yeah, anything within the boundary of a property would be for the property to deal with. Anything in an adopted road, the sort of the top of the drain would typically be us, and anything out with adopted roads wouldn't. That's normally how it's done, but again, that would be looked at in detail when they submit their detailed application.
Okay, so again, we haven't quite got the, because I know that Scottish Water had raised concerns about surface water going into. Okay. Again, another question, again, I'm not sure who will answer it, but obviously this is a suggestion of sporadic open space around the development. Whose responsibility will that be for maintenance?
I'll jump in there. That would potentially, I mean, I don't think that's been confirmed either way. Potentially the council, or it could be factored to the owners of the property. I would imagine that would come at a later date as well.
Okay, and I'll ask one more question. In terms of the developer's obligations for the health provision, what discussions has there been by the applicant? I couldn't, and apologies if it's there, but I couldn't see it, in terms of the capacity of the local health surgery to be able to accommodate the additional.
Yeah, I mean, that was obviously, that was a consultation response that came in from colleagues in developer obligations, and they would have discussed that matter with NHS Grampian when formulating the response, so that the level of monies that have been requested, that would have been agreed through that consultation process, and that's where that figure has come from.
Okay, right. Thank you very much, Gavin. Neil, Councillor Copeland, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, convener. Just for our colleagues, is there any history of flooding on this site? Can anybody answer that one?
Ms. Goa, I can't pronounce your name, sorry.
Hello. No, we don't have any records of, we don't have any records of flooding incidents in the area.
Okay, this is in principle only, but I take it they haven't put in any sort of proposed layout of the site as to where affordable housing would be or anything like that, have they?
Well, we only have the sort of the master plan at the moment, which showed the pockets of development and the general layout. So This is obviously an in-principle application, and at a later stage we would get either detailed permission or approval of matters specified in condition, and that would include 25% affordable, and the layout would be agreed, as I say, at a later stage.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Copeland. Councillor Cormie?
Can you hear me, Convener?
I certainly can.
Yeah. It's this road that's going through from North Deeside Road down to the stables. So that's the one I think you did clarify a bit. But can Gavin clarify if that is the main road from the stables, or is it down below? Would the site traffic manage to access? Is there a way out past that stables? I mean, if this development went ahead, could that be used as a rat run?
I could perhaps give you a look, Gavin, maybe you want to answer. I can give you local knowledge, but I'll let you answer it, Gavin.
Yeah, I mean, that's the access to the stables from North Deeside Road. There is an access that runs through the site, and that's the main access that the stables got. I think there is a road through, but I think it's potentially only for the use of the stables. So I don't think it would be used as a rat run. And certainly, if you're living in, if you were to be living in these properties, I would imagine the easiest way to get onto North Deeside Road would be to use the accesses that go into North Deeside Road.
And carrying on from there, the construction vehicles, how would they access the site?
As I say, that would probably be dealt with at a later stage as well. But I would imagine that temporary accesses or the proposed accesses would be constructed, and access to the site would be taken from North Deeside Road.
Okay, thanks, Gavin. I've got one more. I see the retail is access from the development itself, and I know it's only in principle, but have we any idea what type of retails they've got to go in there?
No, I mean, this is obviously it's an in-principle application at the moment, so we don't know the level of retail or commercial element that's proposed there. Obviously, the allocation in the extant plan is 1,225 square metres, and that makes up small element of retail and office and other commercial space. So we don't know potentially what that's going to be.
Okay, Councillor.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Malik, and then I've got Councillor Stewart.
Thanks very much, Convener. I have a few questions. The first one actually been asked by yourself, but I have very serious concern in relation to road, and the answer did not satisfy myself. I don't know about yours. The second question is the proposed development fall within the school catchment zone for Miltumber School and Cults Academy. Both schools are at full capacity. What is forecast for this new development? How many children will join these two schools? So Andrew can answer my question. The second one is safety of our children is very important for all of us. North Deeside Road is very, very busy. What is the safe route for the kids?
Mr. James. Mr. Jones, sorry. Okay.
The proposed development is expected to generate approximately 46 additional primary school pupils and approximately 14 additional secondary school pupils. Miltumber Primary School is over capacity at the moment. There are plans to construct a new, larger Miltumber Primary School, which would help to provide the additional capacity that's required for this development. So we'd be looking for a contribution from the developer towards the cost of that new school. For secondary provision, Cults Academy is approaching full capacity. So there would be a requirement for a contribution from the developer to help create some additional capacity within that school through reconfiguration of the existing layout of the school.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And then the safe routes to school, Mr. Jones, is that yourself?
I think that would be more for Rose colleagues to respond to rather than myself.
Yeah, that would be myself. So there was an assessment provided within their supporting transport assessment. So obviously there is a proposal for a new crossing which would take you onto the north. Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure what was happening there.
Keep going, Sir Kevin. I think you're okay.
Yeah. So sorry, yeah, there's the proposed new crossing that would take you onto the adopted footpath on the north side of North Deeside Road, which you could go the link up to the existing primary school. There's also crossing facilities at the junction with North Deeside Road and Bing Hill Road, which have got pedestrian phases. And then you've got the link right up the way to Bing Hill, up Bing Hill Road to the new school.
Okay, Councillor Malik.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Stewart, and then I've got Councillor Hendrickson.
Okay, thank you, convener. I realise it's just an in principle planning application, but the point I read with interest is on page 41 about comments from Police Scotland saying that maybe there should be extra measures put in to maybe reduce crime during the construction phase. I just really wondered if we could explain a bit more about that. If the police are highlighting that now, you know, what will actually be done to mitigate any problems there?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. There's obviously, as you say, it's an in-principle application, so we've encouraged in the informatives on this consent that prior to putting in a further application, that the applicants and an agent engage with Police Scotland to make sure that any proposed scheme would comply with the relevant Police Scotland guidance.
Okay, Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, but yes, it's good to know that something would happen. I just meant, what would they then? Does that mean they'd have to put up maybe extra? I'll just say fencing, for example, or is it just something to make it more secure to reduce any potential crime? Is that the line of thinking?
Yeah, well, I think during construction, certainly it would be a case of potentially there's extra fencing or security measures that are put in place, and then during after development's completed, it would be a case of you don't have enclosed fences close together. It's a sort of open, sort of landscaped areas, open walking areas, so it feels a bit safer to walk around and things like that, and you're not having people lurking in the background. So I mean, that's generally what the Police Scotland advice would be, and that's potentially what would come forward in any future application.
Okay, thanks very much, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Hendrickson.
Thank you, convener. Just a couple of questions. I'm just getting a bit of clarification about the access to the commercial area from within the residential properties. Am I correct in saying that that would be only by foot or by cycle?
Mr. Clark.
I think, as Michael said, there would be a stopping up. So I think the plan just in front of me, Michael can correct me if I'm wrong, but this sort of green lilac dot would be the stopping up. So yes, from the site, it would potentially be you could only footpath, walking or cycling to the retail element.
Right, thank you. And one further question regarding the wildlife. Looking at the area, it appears to be mostly open fields, and looking at the proposals there, I know they're only in sort of general terms, but is there any indication about how the impact of the proposed sort of scheme would impact on the wildlife?
Mr. Clark.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to get back to my mute button and my mouse wouldn't move up. Yeah, I mean, there was obviously an ecological report submitted in support of the application, and there was potentially some species that were found on the site, and there is further mitigation measures and further plans that will need to come in at a future stage. And as I say, in support of the application to ensure that there was no adverse impact on those species.
Right, thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Hendrickson. Any further questions from members? I can't see any more hands. No? Okay. The recommendations are obviously a willingness to approve subject to conditions. I won't be moving the officer's recommendation. I will be moving refusal on quite a number of grounds, actually. Do I have a seconder because obviously the protocol is that if we go against officer's recommendation, we will have a slight recess till I meet with officers. So I just need to take Councillor Malik.
Yeah, I'm happy to second you, Councillor. And Benita.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, if we could now take, I think probably a 15-minute recess and come back.
Convener,
Councillor, sorry, where are you, Councillor Copeland?
yeah, I will move the officer's recommendations, just in case everybody was going with you, so we have the debate. So
Okay.
I'm looking for a seconder.
Okay, all right, no problem. Obviously, if we go into our breakout for now, Councillor Copeland, we'll bring that back when we come back at the next stage. All right. So in fact, I'm just looking at the clock. It's 10:37. So that if we come back around 10:55, so that you can either have a comfort break or whatever. But I'll be going into a chat room with the officers. Okay. Thank you, folks.
I'll just note for the recording that we're taking a short break in order for you to go through your reasons for moving refusal. Okay, so if the members can please switch off their microphones and cameras during this time. Thank you.
Okay, so can someone invite me into chat, please?
Yeah, so Lisa, I'll do that just now along with Councillor Malik.
Yes, I'll do that. Thank you.
Lindsay, I don't seem to have been invited in yet. Don't know.
Sorry?
I'm still sitting. Oh, that's okay. I've got it.
Oh, is that you? Okay. Hi members, just advise that Councillor Bolton, etc. will be at least another 5 minutes. So if you just all hold fire. Thank you.
Are we all there? Apologies for the rather long delay there, folks. It's obviously quite a lot to discuss.
Yes, I'm here.
Just making sure you're all back.
I can do another roll call if you want.
Yeah, I think probably just to make sure. I don't want to be not being here.
Okay, so if members could just advise that you're present. Convener?
I'm here.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Allen?
Here.
Councillor Hendrickson?
Here.
Councillor Copeland?
I'm here.
Councillor Cormie?
Here.
Councillor Delaney?
Here.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Here.
And Councillor Malik?
Here.
Okay, so we can continue on. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. So I will be moving refusal on quite extensive grounds, but primarily that we have a proposed local development plan and an adopted new strategic plan that comply with each other. This representation to this application is, I believe, a very strong material consideration. There is a number of policies that I believe that this will then conflate with. So I will talk to them all. And I have a seconder in Councillor Malik. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Copeland, you indicated that you were going to move the officer's recommendation. Is that still the case?
Yes, that's still the case.
Okay, thanks, Neil. And has Councillor Copeland got a seconder? No. Pull my chat.
I'll second Councillor Copeland.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hendrickson. Right, members, I'm glad there was only one application on this committee today, because it's obviously an every application is important to every community. I totally accept and respect that. However, what we have before us today is an application that, for me, will intrinsically change the layout, feel and landscape view of Lower Deeside and in particular Multimber. Now, there's a lot through the report that makes that refers to it being included in the current local development plan, and I think we have to understand the site history to be able to fully appreciate what we're dealing with. This site has been, if you like, approached on a number of times to be included in the local development plan. My research goes back as 2008, when it was first, that I could trace it to, there was first approach. Now, it was refused to be included by, at that time, planners and elected members, and supported by the reporter not to be included. There was then a further submission for the 2012 ALDP. Again, what I would remind everybody is anybody that's been involved in these local development plans will recognise you no sooner sign the ink on one and you're starting another one, because it's an extensively long process. So the 2012, again, we were of the same mind. The community, the elected members, the planners, and the reporter once again rejected the site inclusion in the local development plan. But what was quite interesting in 2012, the reporter at that time, when he was examining our local development plan, took the opportunity to give neighbours of certain sites that he was looking at the opportunity to comment further. One that's particularly relevant in this locality is at Lawers Bank, where it had been included in the 2008 plan. And we went back, and I remember it quite well because it was myself that moved that we actually returned Lawers Bank to the Green Belt. And that was supported by the residents of Community Council and by the reporter. The important thing that I would say here was the opportunity to make comment. We then moved into the 2017 local development plan, which is the current or extant plan currently. Now, again, there's quite a history to this site. When it was put forward, both they put forward 2 sites. One was for residential and commercial, which was for 60 residential units and 1,225 square meters of commercial space. And then there was another proposal for just purely employment land. Neither of these were taken forward by the planners as for into the main issues report. It was, we endorsed the officer's recommendation, and at the proposed plan, again, it didn't feature. So at no point was there any concern by residents, the community council, or elected members that this would suddenly slip into the plan. And you know, and just to give you a bit of a flavour on how this was viewed, it says the development of the site would have an impact on the River Dee Valley landscape, as the development would be very prominent from the North Teesside Road and the River Dee. The site is also located within the Miltimber and Cults Academy zones where the school capacity, they do not have capacity to accommodate children. Now, you know, that was the assessment by our planners, which to say we endorsed at all stages, including the proposed plan stage. However, it went forward to the reporter, and the reporter moved otherwise. Now, his decision was rather confusing in that he cited that there wasn't enough greenfield, but that was because he actually removed some greenfield, and on the premise that there was ancient woodland. But as I say, it was more confusing when he then allocated a further 2 sites along with this one, which were ancient woodland and actually appear very clear on the ancient woodland inventory. So, you know, he also, as I say, put in 2 sites which had green belt. So, you know, you can imagine the community were slightly perplexed. So there's never been an opportunity, not at the main issues report, not at the proposed plan, and they didn't contact me. So, you know, there's a fundamental failing in how this site was allocated, in my view. Also, in the consideration by the reporter, there was very little consideration given to the school estate strategy, and that we had a significant amount of capacity coming up through primary, limited capacity at Cults. We had a full Miltimber school, you know, and I mean, the reporter himself said when he was doing it that there might be, I'm just having a look to see the exact word he used, that there could potentially might be some a new school to take in the Miltimber children. You know, might doesn't work for me. And to be fair, the reporter did recognise that the site had landscape value, describing it as being a wedge of countryside into the urban, bringing a wedge of countryside into the urban area, and contributing to a semi-rural feel to Miltimber with views across the Dee Valley over the site to the A93. So he was very clear that this existed and understood that element. Again, he made no reference to the retail being allocated through the old full development, which was an attempt to create a heart up to next to the new school. So, you know, there's quite a history to how this is landed in the local development plan. And it's the reason that there was no opportunity at any stage for the community voice to be heard, I feel gives the proposed plan far more weight than perhaps you would give it at other times. That sitting alongside the fact that we do have a strategic development plan that was signed off by ministers in August. So the information and the evidence and the relevance to the city and the economy of the wider Scotland is better, I would suggest, laid out through these plans. Now, part of the planning bill that was passed the Planning Act last year, it made reference very heavily around making sure that we engaged with the community in terms of looking at their community plan. Now, Cultside and Miltimber Community Council have been very active in terms of making sure they have a relevant and up-to-date community plan. And in that plan, they talk very much about protecting and enhancing the green spaces. They have reference in various places throughout their plan, and they need to protect these because they're fear of the gradual loss of green space. particularly along the North Deeside corridor. So I would ask you to remind yourselves of that, members, as we move forward through this. As I say, I've got quite a lot to say, so apologies if I seem to go on. If I can just move back over. Apologies, I'm making paper rustle an awful lot. I'm just trying to find my place of what I want to relay to you. So the allocation that we have seen come forward on the site was for, as I say, 60 houses and 1,225 square meters or meters squared for the site that was allocated through the extant Aberdeen Local Development Plan. However, that has not been what's been applied for. What was applied for was 99 houses and 2,000 square meters, squared space, retail office space. Now, for me, that does not accord with the site allocation in the exact or the current Aberdeen Local Development Plan 2017, and there's no justification for departing for this. And for that reason, I would suggest that we don't consider the Aberdeen Local Development Plan being met. It's also contrary to the settled view of the council as expressed in the Local Development Plan 2020, which I think articulated why it's a significant given we know responses. 5 of them admittedly were in support, but I think when we see that level of communication, I think from our communities, it's to our detriment if we fail to recognise their voice. You know, but not only do I appreciate that they in the report that there is a suggestion that we condition restricting both the retail and business element, and that we condition the number of houses. Now, for those who have been around planning long enough, you'll recognise that conditions can be varied, conditions can be removed. And again, I've been at this long enough to see, you know, the retail site, which wants a front-facing onto North Deeside Road, obviously intends attracting passing traffic, not just serving the local community. And with 145 car parking spaces and being immediately adjacent to residential properties, gives me cause for alarm. We already, as I mentioned, have an element of retail proposed in the Old Fold development, which after 3 years of marketing still hasn't been taken up, but we're still hopeful with the new school being built there that will then attract business to that location. And our concern would be that to do anything in this location would be detrimental to the master plan at Old Fold. And again, as I mentioned, this wasn't referred to by the reporter when he allocated this through the ALDP. Moving on. Sorry, I'm just give me 2 seconds. I'm just trying to find where I've lost my place. If we look at the various policies, it's been quite astounding that some of the things that have been commented on, such as the density, suggesting that the density that is being our policy H3, that they're being quite gracious that they're not using the full density that would be available. But again, I think that shows a lack of understanding of what the reporter was trying to achieve in terms of trying to protect the landscape. Just because you've got that amount of land doesn't mean to say you've got to cover it all in houses, and that you could have actually had more open space. Now, one of my other concerns is that there is open space, but there's no reference for areas for young families, children in particular, to play. Now, it's a kilometre away from the school and around the same away from the community facilities, which are up at the top of Miltimber. So for young children to be able to access that on their own would make it very difficult. I appreciate this is a planning in principle. However, I still believe that that was an oversight in not identifying how that would be addressed. We also then, as I say, I've addressed, I think, fully the concern of the retail element and also the impact on the adjoining neighbours. On each one residential amenity, you know, there's a number of tests that have to be met. Does it constitute overdevelopment? Well, it depends whether you're referring to overdevelopment, particularly on the site, or if you're looking at overdevelopment in the wider context of schools, impact on schools, which I would suggest it does. It doesn't relate to the current layout of housing in the immediate area. The other elements that we have to look at is, does it have an unacceptable impact on the character and amenity of the surrounding areas? Well, I would suggest very much it does. And I'll talk more about that and why when I talk about the landscaping, the density would have, the impact the density would have on the landscaping. And that also relates to policy D2. Does it have a loss of valuable and valued area of open space? Well, I think we can all see that it clearly has a major impact. And I go back to the point that if you look at any brochure or anyone trying to sell their house in Lower Deeside, and in fact, I had a quick look to see how it was described by another another developer who was advertising Mill Timber, and it described it as a quiet, semi-rural pocket celebrated for its tranquility, security, and open spaces. And again, if you look at the comments made by the Community Council, again, their reference to the identity of the Lower Deeside is about the value of open space, the value of grazing land, and the corridor on the North Deeside Road, providing views across the Dee Valley. And Scottish Natural Heritage also make reference to the view, the Dee Valley. So, you know, in H1, does it comply? No, it doesn't. Does it conflict? Absolutely. We move on in terms of Scottish Water. Now, they have got concerns because there hasn't been, and again, I accept that it was a planning in principle, but as yet, they haven't actually identified if there's sufficient water connections. So that still has to be examined. And as I say, I appreciate that there's a condition there, but you know, this application tends to have many conditions to try and make it work. Moving on, sorry, just need to keep picking up my notes. If I could just go back to the proposed local development plan. Now, you know, it runs through the report that we potentially shouldn't give it as much weight as I have. However, I think it's a material consideration, and you'll see that in the planning circular 32013, where development management procedures specifically refer to proposed local development plans as being an example of a material consideration that states where development planning policies are not directly relevant to the development proposal, material considerations will be particularly important. It's submitted that the same approach should be taken with development proposals that significantly exceed that which the site is allocated. So, you know, there has been legal cases, Mrs. Pilkington versus the Scottish Ministers, where the emerging plan can outweigh the provisions of the adopted plan. And for me, one of the major material considerations was the lack of opportunity for this community to engage. And we have now had a very full engagement with them, with over 820 responses. I would also highlight that obviously back on the 30th of April, this committee heard an application for Clover Hill, and you know, that site in the current local development plan wasn't zoned for residential; it was zoned for industrial. Now we talk about uncertainty through the report of whether this site may or not be taken out by the reporter at the examination stage, but the same could have been reflected for Clover Hill. But we have made a decision on Clover Hill, not just using the proposed plan, but again using other material considerations that we felt that it was appropriate to approve it. Now, the Tory site, which was obviously the zone was changed from there to accommodate the industrial element that was lost from Clover Hill. So, you know, we have to be consistent in terms of understanding that there are differences that will prevail. If I could just go on to talk about education. It's very easy for us to take a developer's obligation. I'm not saying it's easy for them to pay it, but you know, they will offer up and they will meet their obligations. But I think we have a real policy. It has an impact on the quality of the education provision that we provide when we start to, if you like, over-expand. Now, in the submission by the developer, they made reference, and it was Geddes Consulting at 2.99 of the report. If you go to St. Joseph's, you are expected to go to the grammar. Now, anybody, and I think all the councillors around the committee will understand that actually you may go to a faith school at your primary age and provision. However, we don't have a secondary provision in place dedicated to faith schools. So what you are expected to do is go to the school that your address is zoned to, not what your primary school that you went to. And at 2.110.5, they've also said you enter the associated secondary school, St. Joseph's. Not true. Apologies, switch now. So, you know, fundamentally, they haven't understood something that I think is quite basic in terms of education. But again, you know, at the moment with COVID, we see the need for space in school to allow social distancing. I know that at the moment, and hopefully this will be a temporary situation, but it will allow us to reflect on the whole schools estate. And I think that's what we've been doing for some time along Lower D side. And again, I think it was something that was failed to be addressed by the reporter when he allocated the Miltimber site over the Cooter site, because you know, we have a capacity issue in Miltimber. We hadn't a capacity issue in terms of overcapacity at Cooter, quite the reverse, and that's why we apportioned housing there as opposed to Miltimber. But both schools feed into Cults Academy, so we needed to protect that allocation for absorbing the additional children that we would like to be able to put into Cooter. We also have I would say a difficult situation at Cults Primary, where we have it's the largest primary in Aberdeen, primary school in Aberdeen, and it's continually under pressure. And with the new Miltimber school, that gives us an opportunity to look at how we zone Lower D side. And that's not predicting that we're doing anything, but it's certainly something that we need to make sure that we optimise our space, but also deliver a quality educational provision for all. So, you know, for me, the extra money doesn't outweigh the need to protect the integrity of the education provision across Lower D side. Then we go on to P3, sustainable and active travel. Now, again, I heard what my roads colleagues said to me about that they don't have the plans. Now, as a local member, and I know that Councillor Malik will be able to confirm this, the A93 is a main radial route into Aberdeen, but it's not a particularly wide road, and actually the current cycle lanes along that road would not meet standards of today. Now, I think with the suggestion of these ghost lanes, that we will see either a removal or certainly a detrimental impact on those cycle lanes to, in fact, make it very difficult, if not dangerous, for cyclists to use the North Deeside Road along that part. We will also potentially maybe see the narrowing of the footpath. Now, currently the footpath on the side of the development is not particularly wide as it is. And on the other side, again, you've got a lot of driveways coming out onto that, individual driveways. So my concern would be for children travelling to school. Is that going to give them a suitable route to school, given the school is a kilometre away? What we don't want to do is parents to feel, from a safety point of view, they have to get everybody in the car. We should be providing accommodation and routes that will meet that expectation today. So C2, which is managing the transport impact of the development, requires the development to demonstrate that we have sufficient measures have been taken to minimise traffic generation. I have concerns where, as I say, we have a car park for 143 cars attached to a retail office space. That doesn't suggest that we're taking measures to reduce car journeys into this area. I think actually it suggests that we're encouraging it. So I think, again, we have a level of contention with both T3 and T2, sorry, or T2 and T3 policies. I've spoken about the retail element, which I went into. I've spoken about the ghost lanes. I've spoken about the school. I'd like now just to talk a little bit more about the impact on the residential amenity of the existing residents immediately adjacent to the site, particularly those who are next to the retail offering. It's within meters of their rear gardens or their back doors in some cases. And, you know, given that we don't know what could go in there, it could be, you know, given the desire to have a front elevation onto the roadside, we could be looking at, you know, a largish supermarket. We could be looking at Starbucks. We could be looking at various other uses that hasn't been identified. And I think it's unfair to those residents who, as I reiterate, didn't get the opportunity to engage in this process until this stage, to have very little detail even now, and for us to be prepared to give planning in principle. If I suppose I'm just trying to think what else. I'm trying to leave you something to say, Councillor Malik. I've gone on. The other element that I have concerns over is NC 4 and 5. Now, I have talked about the retail offering up at Old Fold, but also, again, I think there is a lack of understanding of what currently exists in the area, because I don't believe that the evidence that was led on the existing neighbour towns or neighbour centres, because actually at Beeltside we've had a shop there which is on the North Deeside Road empty again for a number of years. We've had a shop in Cuter empty for a number of years, and I do have a fear that the vitality and sustainability of these particular local neighbourhood shops who have done huge amount of a really huge amount of effort to support their communities through the COVID time will be undermined, particularly given the size of the car park would suggest that we could be seeing something, I think, out of keeping. If I could then move on to the impact on the green space network, and I would relay this to the fact that I'm actually looking at giving the weight to the proposed plan, and where we return these fields to the green space network and green belt. Now, for me, it makes the green space network, I know it's got a new name of blue and green something, but if you could bear with me, and it's policy NE1, makes it clear that the proposals of the development are likely to destroy and erode the character and the function of the green space network, and it should not be permitted. And the proposed development, in my view, will build on a significant proportion of the site. And what we will see is an inevitable erosion of the character and the function of that green space network, which is, as I say, policy NE1. What hasn't been referred to by the applicant is that the fact that the Deeside Way is actually designated as a local nature conservation site. This is a non-statutory local designation identified by the local authority as per the Scottish Government planning policy, and offers protection through the Council's local development plan. These sites have been identified as locally important for the nature conservation. Again, what we've seen, particularly in the Miltimber area, was the development of the AWPR, a development on Contlaw Road, a development on Old Fold. So what we're seeing now is the squeeze on wildlife. We're seeing the squeeze on their natural wildlife corridors. We're seeing a squeeze on their natural feeding and breeding grounds. Now, it's, I think, a view that whilst we see that there's been some level of analysis or survey, again, we have conditions on it to see how we can mitigate these things. So we mitigate out the wildlife or to mitigate, to allow the people to move in. I think we need to, I would suggest, consider far more carefully the impact on the wildlife corridors and all the rest of it that makes, I think, the area what it is. The impact on the landscape character, as I said, the reporter recognised its landscape value and described it as bringing a wedge of countryside into the urban area and contributing to semi-rural timber with views across the Deeside Valley and also over the site from the A93. The site forms part of the River Valley, Aberdeen's landscape character type as defined by the Scottish Natural Heritage in 2019's landscape assessment in Scotland. The assessment for this landscape type highlighted the river as a major landscape feature of the city, with views contained by the valley's landforms, a sense of tranquility experienced in them. Clearly, the development of this nature and scale proposed by the planning in principle will certainly erode, and I would suggest permanently destroy the character and type and undermine the value of what the city offers as a whole. This proposed development will urbanise what is currently a semi-rural area. Now, in the Community Council's community plan, which again has to be given weight if you look at the Planning Scotland Act last year, absolutely values green fields, grazing fields. Now, it's quite interesting because if you look back to when the stables were relocated from nearer the AWPR to where they are, I looked at that report just out of interest to see, what was people's views then. Now, it was raised at that stage, even all those years ago, by the Community Council, that this, whilst understandable, and the stables have been impacted by the AWPR, would potentially open up the existing fields or remaining fields for development, and they've been so right. So their fears have been, unfortunately, qualified in this application. Also, another comment that was made in a representation to that planning application was, they weren't this by having the stables there would give a protection to these fields and the view and the landscape and the valley and everything that set the character of the area to be. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. And again, that person who put that representation in clearly feared this coming and felt by not resisting an equestrian centre there, that it would give them a level of protection. Unfortunately, this didn't materialise. So if we look at policy D2, which is landscape, it requires developments to have a strong landscape framework, which, amongst other things, improves and enhances the setting and visual impact of the development and creates local identity. I would contend that it gives a local identity as it is, The policy also stresses that the quality development will conserve, enhance or restore existing landscape features and protect and enhance important views of the city's landmarks and features when seen from busy and important public accessible vantage points, such as roads, railways, recreation areas and pathways, particularly from the main city approaches. Clearly, the proposed development plan is also contrary to this policy in that it does not enhance it for the better. It rather undermines the high quality and distinctiveness of the existing setting that it provides, not just for Miltimber, but for Lower Deeside and the wider city. Scottish National Heritage, as I say, I've already alluded to that they have advised, in their view, that the proposed development would not necessarily adversely, in fact, impact on the integrity of the Deeside stack. However, they have made it very clear that its council it has to be content that the drainage arrangements outlined in the information submitted in the application are adequate to prevent pollution to the adjacent water courses. And a methodology statement which identifies the site-specific measures required to prevent pollution during construction is prepared and adhered to. Now, we have had an undertaking, these things will be done. However, it is the council's responsibility to ensure that this happens. I think, members, I would just, as I say, ask you to think very carefully about this application. In the master plan and of this report and in the report, and I'd love to be able to tell you which page it was on, but unfortunately I can't. You know, it does make a statement which I think speaks volumes in my view. It says, in relation to the master plan, it is, however, noted that the approach taken with the submitted master plan is different than which would normally be expected, and falls short in some aspects that would be typically provided as part of the master plan. Please, members, I will address you finally in summing up, but hopefully I've left Councillor Malik something to speak to. I'm sure I have. If I could pass over to Councillor Malik.
Thank you, Convener. I'm happy to second you, although you covered everything because there was no time limit for you, so you spoke for more than 35 minutes.
We don't have time limit in planning, you're all right.
Well, you didn't leave anything for me. Well, I kick off with my main concern is the public safety and cyclist safety at North Deeside Road. North Deeside Road is very busy and I've been using for more than 20 years and twice a day, and it is still very busy road, and I have a major concern about the cyclist, and we have very little detail in the proposed development from the North Deeside Road. Was asked this morning, and answer was not in great detail either. This proposal has attracted an awful lot of attention, and indeed there are over 800 objections to the proposal. You look at the report and it says in terms of the proposed ELDP, it is noted that at the meeting of the full council on the 2nd of March 2020, it was agreed to remove the site from the proposed plan and revert the designation of the site back to greenbelt and green and blue infrastructure. As a result of this, the principle of developing this site is not supported in the PALDP. With the proposal on green belt land, it would be considered contrary to the proposed policy NE1, and that it would fail to meet any of the exemption criteria listed in that policy. The proposal is not associated with existing activities in the green belt or within the boundaries of an existing activities, is not small scale. Would increase the intensity of the activities on the site and would not be subordinate to what exists on site as present. And none of the other exemption criteria listed are of relevance in this instance. On the same basis, the proposal would also be contrary to proposed policy NE2, green and blue infrastructure in that development site would likely fail to support and enhance the green space network due to the scale of development proposed. And I think you covered most of the thing, and this development is contrary to council wishes within the local plan, and on that base, I fully support your views that this application should be refused. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, convener. That was a rather extensive submission by yourself. Everybody will be glad to know that I'm not going to address all the points that you raised. I'm going to keep this as short as possible. What we have here is an application to build houses on a site in the local development plan as it stands at the moment, identified as being suitable for housing. It's that simple. That's what it comes down to. The site in the current plan has been identified as a housing opportunity site. And we have an application to build houses on it. Now, at this moment in time, this is purely in principle. So, to my mind, I might not like the application. And I don't think officers actually like the application. That's why they've imposed so many conditions on this application, like reducing the number of houses that's going to go on it, the size of the retail development has been changed, the other policy conditions that they've put on, and the developer obligations they've put on. But let's not forget, this is purely an in principle application. The principle being this site, as it stands, is identified as a housing opportunity site. This is a housing application. Now, we can deal with the technicalities and the ins and outs if it comes back, because that's when we have to determine if what is actually being proposed is suitable or not. Right now, we're being asked to basically say, yes, the principle of building houses on here is acceptable. Now, you've put up a very good argument why it shouldn't be acceptable, and you've mentioned the new plan, which is not in force. We've had developments in the city on other sites that from the designated for what's going on to them, but we've changed it and put them on. The new site will change the designation of this. I fully accept that. But as things stand, this is an opportunity site for housing. This is a housing application. As I said, not ideal, but the principle is currently it's identified for housing. Now, I know it's not, and I know as the application stands, it's not acceptable. But with suitable conditions, it may be acceptable. So I think we need to let this go through in principle, and we can deal with any detailed plan when that is subsequently submitted. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Copeland. Councillor Hendrickson, sorry, my mouth's gone dry.
Thank you, convener. Don't worry, everybody gets my name wrong, pronounces it wrong. There's not much I'd like to say, but I take all the points that you put forward. I think I see the points that Councillor Copeland has made in the fact that at the moment it's not, it is designated as a development site for housing. So I think I would have to agree with everything that Councillor Copeland has put forward, and I think that, mind you, I do understand the sensitivity of the point of the area, and I think that's something that at various other sites through the city is something that concerns me as well. So that's basically all I like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hendrickson. Would anybody else like to join debate? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, we'll go straight to summing up then. I think probably I've spoken too much today, guys.
Councillor Allen,
sorry, Councillor Allen. Sorry.
Yeah, I did put my hand up. I just was wondering, when you were talking just now you mentioned the local community councils, which is fine, they're a very relevant group, and that they had thoughts and plans for what they would like to see in their local plan. Have they thought or have they identified any other areas within their boundaries for housing as a community council?
Obviously, that's a question for me.
Yeah, could you either answer it or do it in your summing up, whatever? But would
Okay, I'll address it and sum it up if that's okay, Councillor Allen.
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
Anybody got anything else they want to say in debate there? Okay, Councillor Copeland, back to you for summing up.
No, I think we've covered everything. Basically, I think the officers got this one right, and we should support them.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Copeland. You'll be glad to know that I'm not going to speak quite so long this time. I think an awful lot of it has been said previously. Councillor Copeland has brought it down to the nub of it's in the Aberdeen Local Development Plan. But if you look at as I say, it went back to the guidance that comes out of the Scottish Government, you can and should give weight to other material consideration, which allows the proposed plan to be given more weight. Now, we have seen applications that hasn't been in the local development plan, that hasn't been in the strategic development plan. One that springs to mind, hate to keep bringing it up, was Kingsford, you know, and despite that not flying, it got through. We had Clover Hill, which I just talked about, where again, it's not identified in the current local development plan for residential, yet again, we let it go through and accepted that the proposed local development plan was a material consideration. What we have to give consideration, and I would urge members to think very, very carefully about, is this proposed first, or this planning application is the first opportunity that this community has had a voice, has had an opportunity to make their views known, because it wasn't promoted by the council, and it wasn't just not promoted by the council once, should I say. We didn't promote it in 2008, we didn't promote it in 2012, we didn't promote it in 2017, and even with the proposed plan, which had two bids in for this site by the developer, we didn't support those either, because they were for more houses or a bigger retail. So, you know, we have been consistent, but yet one person changed that for this community, and we now have an opportunity to rectify the situation, and we did that through the proposed local development plan. And I think it's disingenuous, it's probably the best way of putting it, to suggest that the developer suggested that he hadn't realised the feeling of the community. I can assure you, I went to both the consultations that public consultations that we had, which were 2 till 7, and I got a lot of complaints about the hours because a lot of people worked and couldn't make it. But the representations that we made to the community council, the anguish and the amount of meetings that took place after the reporter returned our local development plan at the end of 2016. You know, there was potentially a legal challenge that failed simply because of a missing couple of brackets and had to be withdrawn. You know, so this site has caused a lot of stress, worry, upset, not just because it's removing the landscape and the setting of a community and of an area and of the city, but because it removed their voice, their ability to be heard. Now, I know in the proposed plan, there's certain areas that people are not particularly content with, but they've had 16 weeks to at least express that. And that will be laid out very clearly in a plan that comes back to us. And I know, I hear Councillor Hendrickson, and that's fine. In that proposed plan, what we did was we recognised the schools estate strategy for Lower Deeside. We recognised where we had capacity that needed to be addressed. And that's why we have allocated, and both the two community councils along Lower Deeside, that's Cockfield, Clyde, Timber and Peter, had an agreed strategy on how to support the proposed plan. The Peter one supported the removal of this site. They accepted an allocation into their ward, which all feed into Cults Academy, because they knew it was the right thing to do for their community and for the wider Lower Deeside. So the numbers marry with what's in the strategic development plan, and it marries with the proposed plan. And more importantly, it marries with our constituents, and it marries with people's expectations that their voices can be heard. We have before us a planning in principle with very little detail, with far more questions than answers. I have grave reservations about the ability to do much on the North Deeside Road without either on cyclists impact safety. I have huge concerns about the impact on the landscape and of the wildlife in the area. I have huge concerns about squeezing more children into a situation in terms of the schooling, regardless of developers' obligations, because we have a plan, we have the proposed plan that has met the numbers that have been allocated through the educational system and the school estate. So for this is an additionality that we hadn't forecast. Now, every development we recognise when it's in the local development plan is an indicative number. But, this application is for 99. So it's not just 10% over or 20% over, it's 50% over. And even with a restriction, it's still 30% over what was allocated. And in my experience, we have, as I say, reduced the footprint of the retail, but yet we haven't reduced the car parking. That speaks volumes to me. That suggests that we will see an attempt and a pushback to expand that footprint. And we've seen it in other developments. We had one not that long ago where what we thought was going to be a small local shop turned into a supermarket. Now, we've heard that there's empty shops already in Peter. We've heard there's an empty shop in Bilside. Let's not undermine businesses that exist. That wasn't assessed, in my view, properly when this site was put in by the reporter. There wasn't the assessment of this site that would normally take place. And in fact, the assessments that were of this site that were taken by our officers rejected it, and didn't reject it once, rejected it in 2008, 2012, 2017, and again in 2020, ahead of myself. So please, members, I ask you to support my motion to refuse this application. Thank you. Lindsay.
Thank you, convener. I'll just advise members that Councillor Delaney has had to leave the meeting, so I won't read out his name for the vote.
Okay.
So the committee has before it a motion in the name of the convener to refuse the application and an amendment in the name of Councillor Copeland to approve the application. I'll just read out the reasons for refusal. So the proposed development is contrary to policy NE1 of the proposed Aberdeen Local Development Plan 2020, in that it would fail to meet any of the exemption criteria listed in that policy. The development is also contrary to policy NE2, which is green and blue infrastructure of the proposed Aberdeen Local Development Plan, in that development on site would fail to support and enhance the green space network due to the scale of development proposed and its impact on the value of the site for wildlife. The proposed Aberdeen Local Development Plan represents the settled view of the Council as to the planning policy considerations applicable to the site. The significant level of public opposition to the development on the basis of the proposal's lack of compliance with the proposed ALDP is considered to add further to the weight that can be given to to the proposed local development plan in considering this application. Taking these factors into account for this particular application, it is considered that greater weight would be afforded to the Green Belt Policy NE1 and Green Belt Infrastructure Policy NE2 zoning proposed by the proposed Aberdeen Local Development Plan than the mixed use policy of H3 zoning currently applicable to the site in adopted local development plan. Secondly, the proposed development would be contrary to the OP114 allocation in the adopted local development plan due to the proposed scale of development, which is significantly greater than indicated in the allocation. Thirdly, it has not been demonstrated that the development would sufficiently fit into the wider landscape setting and character of the area, especially in public views from the Deeside Line, North Deeside Road and the Aberdeen Western Development Plan, and would therefore fail to meet the requirements of Policy D2, which is landscape, of the Aberdeen Local Development Plan 2017, impact on views from Deeside Way. Number 4, the proposal would be contrary to Policy I1, which is infrastructure, delivery and planning obligations of the adopted local development plan, in that the developer obligations secured for education provisions are not considered to be sufficient to adequately mitigate the adverse impact that the proposal would have on school capacity. Number 5, it has not been adequately demonstrated that the commercial development proposed in the eastern part of the site would avoid a detrimental impact on the residential amenity of neighbouring houses and is therefore contrary to Policy H2, which is mixed use areas, and T5, which is noise, of the Aberdeen Local Development Plan 2017. Number 6, the retail impact of the development, particularly in relation to its impact on allocated retail development with Old Fold, has not been adequately assessed due to the absence of a suitable retail statement and is therefore contrary to Policy NC8, which is retail development serving new development areas of the Aberdeen Local Development Plan 2017. And number 7, the proposed development would be contrary to Policy T3, which is sustainable and active travel, in as far as it has not been demonstrated that the development would not have an adverse and detrimental impact on existing cycle lanes on the North Deeside Road. So could members please vote motion to refuse or amendment to approve? Convener?
Motion.
Councillor Stewart?
Approve.
Councillor Allen?
Councillor,
Sorry,
can I stop there?
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor
Can
Stewart. Motion is to
Can you just reword that, because I don't think people maybe understood.
Sorry, so the committee needs to vote either motion to approve it, motion with the convener to refuse the application and amendment with Councillor Copeland to approve. So convener?
Motion.
Councillor Stewart?
Amendment.
Councillor Allen?
Motion.
Councillor Hendrickson?
Amendment.
Councillor Copeland?
Amendment.
Councillor Cormier?
Motion.
Councillor Delaney is absent. Councillor Mackenzie?
Motion.
And Councillor Malik?
Motion.
So the motion carries 5 votes to 3, so that means that the application is refused. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Before we leave, I would just like to wish Councillor Yvonne Allen a happy birthday, and apologies for maybe talking too long and delaying you from your birthday celebrations. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Okay, folks, have a good day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Next meeting's December, by the way, so it'll be Christmas jingle bells, Christmas earrings.
Oh yes,
I'll just
be
stop.
decorated.
I'll just stop the recording now. Thank you.
Thank you.